Hello and welcome to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Usually I cover technology trends and news, but today I thought I can do something a little bit different. And with me here today is Kumarasamy, who is joining me live now from Canada to talk to us more about communication, public speaking. If you ask me why I'm doing this, because I know it from myself. Us technology people usually we are introverts. So I have today with me Brenden. Brenden, first of all, thank you for joining me. Please, can you introduce yourself, what you do, and if you want to talk about also your venture?
Of course, Mim. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. So for me, the journey started in business school. I never really wanted to become an entrepreneur. My goal was to become an accountant, funny enough. So that's what I studied in, and I was a numbers guy. But then during my journey there, I did two things. One, I did case competitions. Think of it like hackathons in the computer science world, but for business students. So instead of competing on technology projects, what we were doing instead is businesses would give us cases to solve for, and the best students would often get jobs at these companies like in hackathons. So that was my focus, and I accidentally got really good at speaking and sharing ideas. And the other piece is I was a venture capitalist. I ran a student-run fund. It was like a $600,000 fund. I was one of the general partners running the fund. And what I learned in that experience was a lot of technical talents weren't really good at conveying their ideas, but since they were still early in the startup journey, they couldn't afford a coach either. So I started to make videos on public speaking and communication to help people gain access to these tools for free because I think the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford a coach. So I started MasterTalk, and then it later led to clients and it became a business after.
That's cool. Now, the first question that came to my mind actually, because you master at the public speaking, I watched some of the YouTube videos that you have done. Like, what do you think is the importance of having public speaking skill and the communication skill for someone working in technology in general?
Very simple. So here's what I say, Mimit, to anybody in the tech space. A lot of people in the tech space can get away by just being a technical talent. So let's say you go to engineering school, you become a developer, a senior engineer, and most of your success and your performance is based on the code base, based on the key deliverables you're assigning back to the client or to the org if it's an internal project that you're working on. But then at some point in the career, you get stuck. And the reason you get stuck, usually around manager, director, you still get promoted to the role, because there's too much shortage of talent in general in tech. But then when you get promoted to the role, you come to a stark realization that what you get evaluated on has very little to do with the code base anymore because you're not coding anymore. Most of your job now is managing people. So it turns into a leadership role. And a lot of engineering schools, I would argue most of them, Mehmet, do not train their students to prepare for the future version of themselves. So for those of you who are going to be CTOs who are already CTOs, communication is essential because now you're not just talking to the internal engineering team where you're working on a specific product feature with. Now you're talking to the entire organization. And as a CTO, you're setting the technology vision for the company, not just a specific project that you used to deliver as a manager. And that requires exceptional communication skills because now you're going to keynotes, you're going to Dreamforce, you're going to events, you're sitting on panels, you're presenting to clients, you're doing sales, and those skills require comms if you want to go to the top of the ladder.
That's brilliant. So the question that came to my mind also immediately now, what do you think is the normal time that someone who's looking to reach the CTO, and like what's usually the time frame that it would take with them to be a good communicator and good public speaking people?
For sure, Mehmet. I think anyone could get really good in just a few weeks, honestly. And I'll tell you why. Let's use the frame of this audience. Think about in your journey, whether it was 5 years ago, 20 years ago, if you're a CTO, when you started coding your first language, whether it was Java, C++, Python, Ruby on Rails, it doesn't matter. So the first time you do that language, you have no idea what you're doing. Right? You're going GitHub probably didn't exist 20 years ago, but you're going on the website, you're trying to figure out how to debug the software. And then, I mean, debug the code. But then after you get good at the language, it becomes easier for you to do it. So then when you try and learn a new language, let's say you go from Ruby to, I don't know, Python, or you go from Ruby to SQL or something, you become a data scientist, who knows? Well, when you go to the new language, sure, you still have to learn the language, but it becomes easier for you to navigate those waters. So in that same way, communication is the same thing, except the problem is no one really teaches communication from an engineer's perspective. So for me, how I teach it is communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, where one of those balls is smiling, one of those balls is body language, one of those balls is eye contact. So for me, it's just doing one ball at a time. I'll give you one easy one, Mimit, that people can practice right away, which is called the random word exercise. Pick a random word like phone, like light bulb, like home, and create random presentations out of thin air. And this helps with two things. One, it helps you deal with uncertainty because life is filled with it when you're meeting somebody new at a party or a business dealing. And the second piece is if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. So just do that a few times a day.
Wow, that's really insightful, I would say. And now, continuing on the same topic, and I've seen it a lot of times. So people usually working in technology, and I know this back in the days from myself, they are kind of introverts. So do you think that if someone is an introvert can come one day and become, a public speaker and, someone who can easily talk to a large audience, especially because he would be coming, as you said, maybe from a deep engineering technology background. So what's your take on this?
I 100% believe it's possible. But it's also about framing the conversation correctly, Mehmet, which is you don't need to be a big speaker in front of thousands of people to be a successful CTO. But what you need to be able to do is you need to be able to talk to teams that are outside of just the core engineering team. Because when you're at the CTO level, it's not just about what code are we working on this week. That's a basic requirement. It's more about saying, where are we going to invest the next millions of dollars into the next technology innovation? So your job as a CTO is to look at the capital that you're being allocated and say, based on my understanding of all of the new technological trends and how deep the tech is and the business that I'm in, I need to make a conscious decision about A, driving that capital in a way that drives the best business outcomes, not technological outcomes, business outcomes, and then justify that spend to the rest of the executive board, which is a completely different skill set than when you're a manager, which is just like, okay, my VP is telling me to run this project and to do scrum calls on this project and to run that P&L. Okay, I'll run it, but that's not the same thing as running the whole org. So for me, I definitely believe it's possible. And the reason is because my whole life I was a terrible communicator, Mehmet. I know I sound great now, but when I was a kid, I grew up in a French education system because I grew up in Montreal and I didn't know French. I'm fluent in French today, but the challenge is my whole life I was presenting a language I didn't even know. And then the second child, I have a crooked left arm. Look at me. I coach a bunch of CTOs, bunch of CEOs, and I have a crooked left arm. So if I could be a great speaker, anyone can. And I have a bachelor's degree in accounting. So if I could figure this out, I think every human being listening to this can.
Wow, that's really motivational, I would say, at the same time. Now, do you think there is a difference from communication presentation perspective? Because for the past 2, 3 years, everything shifted to remote work. And, because of the pandemic, a lot of people, they were completely working remotely and online. Do you think there is a special skill when dealing with public speaking or whether it's just a normal presentation from technical perspective between the online landscape and the traditional, I would say, face-to-face landscape? What's your take on this?
For sure, Mehmet. So there's three main differences between online and in person. The first one is eye contact. So when you're in person, you move your body around to look at the different people in the room as you're presenting to them. Whereas when you're online, whether there's one person or 10,000 people on that Zoom call, you only have to look in one place, which is the camera lens. So if you look directly into the camera lens, you give the illusion that you're looking at everyone at the same time. So that's one. Number two, energy. Let's face it, Mehmet, it's a lot easier to show up with energy when you're in person because you can hug people, you can give them high fives, and there's more accountability. Even for this interview, I'm wearing sweatpants, right? Because I don't have that level of accountability that you would have if you're in person. If you're in person, you got to shower, you got to wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning or 6 a.m. in the morning to go to your 8 a.m. keynote, and everyone's in front of you. So the accountability is hard. The energy too, because you're alone in a basement talking to people. So what does that mean? That means get better in person. Get better in person. Bring your energy up in person and take as much of that energy as possible and bring it back online. That's how you get better. And finally, number 3, accessibility. It's a lot easier for you to talk to your audience if you're in person. So if me and you are filming in Dubai in person, we could just get lunch after. You're right in front of me. There's no friction. Whereas online, the Zoom call just ends. So you need to make an extra effort to get on calls with people, to get into conversations with them for you to get the best feedback on your presentations.
Wow. This is also really helpful, I would say. And I can say from my own experience, because I did the shift as well, again, from an introvert to then a someone who can speak very relaxed in public, and then the shift to the online landscape. And I have to agree with you. What are some of the resources, maybe websites, books, that usually you advise people to look at when they want to enhance their public speaking communication when it comes to CTOs and people in technology?
So normally I would share a book, but for this audience, because I know it so well, Mehmet, let me spin this question a little differently. The problem with books is our fellow CTOs, Mehmet, are just going to spend all day reading books and they'll miss the point, which is the best way to speak is to speak, right? They spend all their lives in their computers doing the code and then they're managing the teams. They don't speak up in the meetings. If you want to get better, you need to speak. The best way to speak is to speak. So what does that mean? Are you booking 15 minutes in your calendar every single day? And don't tell me you don't have 15 minutes because you just spent 15 minutes listening to this. So you have 15 minutes. The question now is, are you going to spend every single day doing the random word exercise? Because guess what, Mehmet, this is the best part about this. Nobody's going to do it. Nobody's going to do it. And the reason it's the best part is because if you're the one CTO who's listening to this and you do it 100 times, just 100 times, 5 times a day for 3 weeks, that takes 5 minutes a day, Mehmet. You'll be ahead of the other 99% listening to this because most CTOs are not willing to do the random word exercise even one time. So even if you do it 100 times, you're going to be not better than 95% of your industry. Imagine if you did more than just that. But just that alone is the right action to take.
That's really, I would say, it's like very exciting to listen to. Another question also that I wanted to ask you about, like, how you define, or from your experience, like you've been in this for a long time, like what makes you say, okay, this guy, he's top notch. He's really, he got it. Like, how do you rank, I would say, someone if he is in a good position from public speaking perspective? Again, I'm talking here about CTOs and technical people.
Absolutely, Mehmet. And it's challenging, right? Because the KPIs that drive business outcomes, that drive technology outcomes, are not as clean as they would be for communication. Because communication is very vague. What does it mean? Does it mean your eye contact is better? Does it mean your body language is better? How do you measure that outcome, that success? Here's the way I do it, which is personal to me. No other coach does it the way I do it. So it's just my definition is how many balls out of the 18 are you able to juggle at the same time? So, for example, the first ball, which is the random word exercise. When I coach my clients, Mimit, we don't go to ball number 2 until ball number 1 is done. So, like, have you done it 100 times? They go, no, Brenden, what's the next exercise? And I throw a book at their face and I go, hey, do the random word exercise 100 times. So, if they do that, that's one ball. Then the second ball is the question drill. I'm not going to go through all 18, but you get the idea. Right? Ball number 2 is the question drill, which is every single day for 5 minutes, just answer one question that you think the board is going to ask you about your expertise or the projects you work on. A lot of CTOs or execs in general, Mehmet, they have a ton of anxiety in the boardroom because the CMO, the CFO, the CEO is going, hey, Mehmet, what's this question? They go, oh, I didn't prepare for that. And they get really stressed. So the question drill solves for that, because if you guess the question in advance, you're going to be much more confident in the delivery. Even if you know the answer, you're going to deliver it properly like a C-level executive. And then the third ball, which scares the bejeebies out of CTOs, is sending video messages. Just take out your phone. Send video messages to people that you love. It doesn't even have to be people at work. Your niece, your nephew, your brother, your sister. Just send them video messages. So the way that I measure success, Mehmet, is how many balls is that technology executive willing to juggle. So for example, the random word exercise is one. Then it's going to be eye contact. Then it's going to be getting rid of your ums and ahs. And the list goes on, but you get the point. So that's how I measure the success of how talented they are.
Anything regarding the tone or, the, I would say, body language? Just out of curiosity, I'm asking.
For sure, Mehmet, happy to. So for me, tone is more ball number 9 and body language is more ball 15. Why is that? The reason is because a lot of people don't make a lot of mistakes with their body language except with their face. So a lot of people, you see a lot of CTOs make this mistake. Whenever they're listening to their direct reports, they don't smile when they're listening. So obviously it's hard to see on audio, but you can see with my face if I do this, if you don't smile even a little bit when you're listening to people, from their perspective, it shows that you don't care. They go, oh, Mehmet's listening to me or Brendan's listening to me, but he's not smiling. So I guess he doesn't really care about what I have to say. That's what your employees are thinking, right? So that's easy to fix. But that's why I leave it for the end, because it's just seasoning. For vocal tones is ball 9. So vocal tones is more about saying, to not overcomplicate this today. Because I want to point out, Mehmet, if somebody is not doing the random word exercise, the question drill, the video messages, you can't do ball number 9. Okay, like you just can't do it. So ball number 9 for me is understanding that tones is a science, not an art. What the best speakers on the planet do, Mehmet, is they use all 3 tones at the same time. We have high tones, regular tones, and low tones. And what the best speakers do is they do a roller coaster. So for example, there's a big difference between last night I ate an apple and it was really good versus last night I ate an apple and it was really good. So you notice how I changed my tones a lot, and that's how you master. But very difficult to do at the beginning. You got to do the first 3 first.
Yeah. So before we're coming to the end, just I've seen a series you recorded that where you tried to speak like some of the big names in history. Which one, like was the hardest for you to do?
That's a very good question. It's probably a woman, for sure. The hardest to do. So the hardest one I've ever done off the top of my head, but I have to think about it more. It's either going to be Esther Perel or one of the exercises I teach my clients that isn't in my videos. I'll tell you what I mean here. So one exercise I get my advanced clients to do, Mehmet, is we have them take stories, personal stories of people that have nothing to do with them. So let's say I was coaching you, I would give you a story of like a 7-year-old Korean girl. So you'd be like, oh my God, like how am I supposed to present this? So those are really hard because you have to imagine yourself as if you're them. So those are really hard for me. But if I had to pick a professional speaker, I would probably say Esther Perel is probably the hardest.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
Last, Brenda, like how people can reach out to you if they are interested to know more about how to master, I would say, their communication skills, presentation skills. Can you tell us about that?
for sure, Mehmet. It was so good to be on the show. Thanks for having me. So 2 ways to keep in touch. One is the YouTube channel. Go to MasterTalk and you'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak. And the second way to keep in touch is my free communication workshop. So I do a free workshop over Zoom every 2 weeks. That's absolutely free. And it's me coaching people live on a Zoom call for 90 minutes. 8-year-old kids come to this training. CTOs of massive companies come to this training. Literally everybody's invited. It's a party. So if you want to come and it's free, go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
I will put that in the comments, both in the YouTube and in the podcast. Well, Brendan, that was really very, I would say, active. episode today with you. I liked the energy. I liked the way you communicated this very easily. And I wish we could have additional, maybe more topics in the future that we can discuss. And again, thank you for having the time. I know you come from a busy schedule on the show. And, you know, so stay tuned for that when it comes to YouTube. And thank you again for listening and watching today. Thank you, Brenden, very much.
Thanks, Mehmet.